The 2024 Chicago White Sox are an unmitigated disaster, a historic dumpster fire unfolding before our very eyes. They've already lost over 20 games, and April is still a few days away from ending. Luis Robert Jr. has already hit the shelf, Yoan Moncada is already on the 60-day injured list. The offense is historically inept as they've been shut out 7 times in their first 19 games, the most for any team ever since 1901. Who the hell is Lenyn Sosa, and how is his OPS plus negative? Right now they have a higher shutout percentage than winning percentage, #analytics. There are so many different ways to characterize this absolute disaster, and as funny and ludicrous as some of these statistics are, part of it does make me very sad. Less than 3 years ago, the Chicago White Sox were one of my favorite teams to watch that wasn't my own. Full of young, exciting Latin players, boasting a fearsome rotation of workhorses, and featuring one of the most electric closers in the game at the time, the 2021 division-winning team had serious and realistic World Series aspirations that sadly never came to fruition. It felt like it all fell apart before it ever really came together in the first place. So today, let's analyze that demise and deconstruction and figure out how the hell we got here. Less than 2 years ago, the Chicago White Sox were a wagon. The 93-win Southside squad cruised to an AL Central crown by a 13-game margin, putting up a winning record in every month of the year. It was the team's first season with over 90 wins since 2005, the same year that they won the World Series. They went 44-32 against teams in their own division, good for a .579 winning percentage. Even after a middling 9-9 start towards the end of April, the White Sox seized sole possession of first place in their division by May 7th and held that same spot atop the division for the next 132 games of the season. Simply put, it was one of the most dominant seasons in franchise history. Their biggest note from this mediocre start was their post for Eloy Jimenez's injury, which totally made it seem like he was dying when in fact he just got hurt trying to rob a spring training home run, but that didn't put a bad omen on the team. They had a top 5 offense in MLB by weighted runs created plus and a top 5 pitching staff in MLB by ERA. In the lineup, there was Tim Anderson, 2 years removed from a batting title. He wrapped up his 3rd straight season hitting over 300, making the All-Star team, and giving the White Sox their best moment of the year in the Field of Dreams game with this absolutely sick walk-off home run. Jose Abreu clubbed 30 home runs quietly, a year after winning AL MVP in 2020. He surpassed Harold Baines for 3rd all-time on the Southside home run list. In the 2nd year of his 4-year contract, Yasmani Grandal led all catchers with a 155 OPS plus and 23 home runs. Yoan Moncada bounced back from a poor pandemic season and was a reliable cog in a potent White Sox lineup, playing his most games in a season since 2018. The story of the beginning of their season was Yermin Mercedes, who didn't hang around long, but his monster month of April propelled the White Sox to get off to a hot start despite a shorthanded roster. He's one of only a dozen players in the 2020s with a batting average over 400 and an OPS over 1100 in a single month. Utility man Leury Garcia managed an .861 OPS in September, carrying the offense down the stretch and powering them to a playoff win with this dramatic 3-run homer against the Astros. We should mention the rotation too. They carried a ton of the weight. 4 starting pitchers threw at least 130 innings with a 1.10 ERA plus or better. Carlos Rodon shined especially in his contract year after getting non-tendered the year prior. He led the American League with a 2.37 ERA, 0.96 WHIP, and a 186 opponent's average. He capitalized his fantastic year with a no-hitter in April. Lance Lynn wasn't far behind, acquired in an off-season trade with the Texas Rangers. He managed a 2.69 ERA, ranking 2nd in the American League, the best mark of his career at age 34. Their bullpen was highlighted by a different off-season move. Liam Hendriks, who they signed to a 4-year deal worth $54 million, proved to be worth every penny. He led the American League with 38 saves, the first White Sox closer to do so in over 30 years. He also became the first White Sox reliever with over 100 strikeouts in relief, leading all relief pitchers in MLB with his 113 punchouts. Between Rodon, Lynn, and Hendriks, the White Sox had 3 pitchers finish in the top 8 of American League Cy Young voting. At the helm of the team was a controversial manager and veteran Tony La Russa, who, at the age of 76, returned to MLB after a 10-year hiatus. They clinched their playoff spot and division title with 10 games still left on the slate. Their American League Division Series matchup against the Houston Astros was contentious but wouldn't go as swimmingly, with Chicago only able to come away with 1 win before exiting unceremoniously in 4 games. It was a tough pill to swallow for Southside fans who had waited a dozen years for a home playoff game only to see the team bounced in the first round. However, fans and players alike held hope that this would be just the beginning of a new era in White Sox baseball. Upstart rookie Gavin Sheets embodied this in a quote after the Game 4 defeat, stating that, "Obviously, right now it sucks. It hurts. But to be able to have this experience my rookie year, I only think I can grow from it. And as a team, team the same way, we're only going to grow from it. But as most of you know from watching baseball and clicking on this video in the first place, that growth never came. The potential that was displayed for a full year would all be squandered in the blink of an eye. The 2021 White Sox are now a distant memory, and the product on the field these days bears no resemblance to the crafty, talented roster that dominated their division just 3 years prior. A quick interruption on today's video to thank today's sponsor, which is MLB 9 Innings. It's one of the best mobile games out there right now, with varying game modes ranging from live PvP to franchise mode, and there's over 2,000 different player cards in their database for you to build your dream roster. Now, if you're a White Sox fan, you can use the active players, or you can maybe use some legends of the game like Mariano Rivera, Joe Morgan, and plenty of others. They have the most up-to-date rosters, team logos, ballparks, and uniforms, so click the link in the description and download MLB 9 Innings today to start your new gaming addiction right on your phone. Thank you to them for sponsoring today's video. Now let's get back to the White Sox disaster. The 2022 squad had a similar goal in mind: run the division back and this time finish the job. However, there were some key roster differences as the calendar turned over. Carlos Rodon parlayed his fantastic season into a 2-year, $24 million contract with the San Francisco Giants. Outside of that, most of the changes were perceived as positive ones. The team added veterans Josh Harrison and AJ Pollock to the lineup. They also signed Kendall Graveman, Joe Kelly, and Johnny Cueto to bolster the pitching staff and provide depth. The 2022 White Sox were a hot topic team as many revered baseball journalists picked them out as American League favorites in 2022. Sorry, Trev, I had to bring it up. Despite a great infusion of talent and the core being maintained for the most part, the 2022 White Sox were a story of regressing back to the mean. But regression didn't come first, injuries did, and it came in an avalanche. Garrett Crochet didn't make it out of spring training before requiring Tommy John surgery. Joe Kelly wouldn't throw a pitch until May. Lucas Giolito pitched 4 brilliant innings on opening day, then hit the shelf for 2 weeks. Tim Anderson failed to appear in the opening day lineup in a season where he wouldn't last past August. Yasmani Grandal missed most of June and July. Eloy Jimenez played the first 11 games of the year, then missed 2 months. No cryptic post from the socials team this time though. A hot start had them at a 6-2 record before an 8-game losing streak plummeted them to 4th place. This was essentially the story of the entire season. The team had a win streak of 4 or more games 6 different times during the year. They also had a losing streak of 4 or more games 6 times during the year. There were plenty of heartbreaking losses too. On April 24th, the White Sox blew a lead to the Minnesota Twins twice in the same game, both times courtesy of a big-time home run from Byron Buxton, who finished the day with 6 RBIs. But a 6-game win streak had them hot heading into an important matchup with the Cleveland Guardians, leading 8-2 heading into the final inning. 3 outs away from extending their win streak and gaining ground in the division, Andres Jimenez homered, a pair of singles, a walk, and an error to set up Josh Naylor with the bases loaded, 2 outs, and a chance to tie the game. He did exactly that with an emphatic grand slam off Liam Hendricks, and even after surviving for 2 more extra innings, Naylor dashed their hopes again with another 3-run homer, putting a heartbreaking loss away with a 12-9 final score. Even as the 2022 team treaded water, they found disadvantages in the most unlikely of places, like their manager, for example. Tony La Russa was always considered a controversial hire, even in 2021 when they won the division. No one could deny his resume, but plenty could question how coherent the guy was in his late 70s. On June 9th, in a game they trailed only by 1 run, La Russa opted to issue an intentional walk to the red-hot Trey Turner to avoid big-time damage. Only the count was already 1-2, a split that Turner managed a .217 batting average in 2022. Up next was Max Muncy, who managed a +6 run value against sliders, pitcher Bennett Sousa's primary pitch. Can you guess what happened next? Yeah, the Dodgers won this one handily. Sometimes La Russa's moves were positive, just not necessarily his own, like the time he used Adam Engel as a pinch runner late in the game against the Astros, mostly because fans sitting in the front row were yelling at him to do so.
And he called it, and he's doing it, he's doing it.
You can't tell me he didn't hustle for his squad though. I mean, look at this guy fly. He's lightning fast. Their defense was also fairly poor. They managed a -17 outs above average value as a team, worst in the American League. A good example in game is this error on a fly ball in left field with 2 outs in the 9th inning of a potential win against Baltimore. The ball wasn't caught, and after this drop, Kyle Stowers hit a game-tying home run off Liam Hendricks, and the Orioles won the game in extra innings. There are so many games like this for this team. It's honestly heartbreaking. everything. Against all inconsistencies and bouts of injuries and manager fiascos, the team still had a serious chance to make a late playoff push in mid-September somehow. With a 76-71 record and just 4 games separating them and the first place Guardians, they played host to Cleveland for a pivotal 3-game set at home. A sweep would take them within 1 game of the lead with a dozen games left to play, and the first game headed to extra innings with the White Sox down in the 10th inning. Improbably down a run with 1 strike left, Jose Abreu came through with a game-tying hit off Emmanuel Clase. Another hit by Eloy Jimenez would give the White Sox a cathartic victory after a season of losing close games to the division rival. But instead, it was a ground out. Then the Guardians scored 5 runs off Jake Diekman in the 11th. They won that game, then they won the next 2 games handily, and then the White Sox lost 5 more games in a row to make it an 8-game losing streak. This sunk them permanently in what would become an 81-81 final record for the team. Exactly 500. Yeah, the 2022 White Sox were the definition of baseball purgatory. They went exactly 500 in the first half, then exactly 500 in the second half. They went exactly 500 against every other team in their division. They were almost exactly middle of the pack in team ERA, 16th in baseball. Their team weighted runs created plus was almost exactly average at 98. Players who were healthy also underperformed. Yoan Moncada saw his OPS plus decrease by 40 points between seasons. After they gave Leury Garcia a 3-year, $16 million deal, he had the lowest weighted runs created plus among all hitters in baseball with at least 300 plate appearances. There's just so much that went wrong with this talented roster, but it wasn't everything. After all, they still managed to win 81 games and they had plenty of contributors on both sides of the ball. Luis Robert, Eloy Jimenez, and Tim Anderson were all positive offensive players when they managed to stay on the field. Dylan Cease stepped into the ace role and flourished. He finished runner-up in Cy Young voting, striking out 227 batters with a 2.20 ERA in 32 starts. Liam Hendriks, despite some tough blown saves that weren't really his fault, still put together another fantastic season with 37 saves and a 1.42 ERA+. All of these guys were still going to be on the team in 2023, so there was still plenty of reason to buy into Chicago. There was really only one significant loss. It was Jose Abreu's departure for a 3-year deal with the Houston Astros. It would be the White Sox first season without Abreu at first base since 2013, 10 years gone. But outside of him, the rotation of Cease, Giolito, and Lynn would be maintained. The lineup even added Andrew Benintendi to the mix on a 5-year deal, the most lucrative free agent deal in White Sox history. And good news, the White Sox would get over 110 games of play from Eloy Jimenez, Tim Anderson, Yasmani Grandal, and Luis Robert, meaning they were all staying on the field. They even got rid of Tony La Russa officially, hiring Pedro Grifol to spearhead a new era of White Sox baseball. I mean, on paper, this team should have been a stark improvement from the year prior, and with things balancing out, they could probably compete for a playoff spot too, right? Aw, what the fuck, guys? How the hell did they lose 101 games? Well, their poor start didn't help their cause. After a week and a half of treading water, the White Sox stumbled into an all-time bad losing skid, dropping 15 of their next 17 games to plummet to the worst record in baseball by the end of April. They got swept by the Rays, and they got swept by the Blue Jays, and they got swept by the Rays again for good measure. It was their first 10-game losing streak in 10 years and their worst start to a season since 1948. The offense was a complete disaster. Tim Anderson, who had hit over 300 each of the prior 4 seasons, lost all semblance of his hitting approach. His 60 weighted runs created plus was the worst of any qualified hitter in baseball. He had just 1 home run on the season, and he also got absolutely throttled on live television by Jose Ramirez. Yasmani Grandal, who had a .420 on-base percentage in 2021, continued his downward spiral towards mediocrity with just a 78 OPS plus. The team ranked at the bottom of the league in weighted runs created plus, on-base percentage, and slugging percentage, all in the bottom 4 at least. Things didn't improve much on the pitching side either. Dylan Cease, the Cy Young runner-up from the year prior, saw his ERA double and his whip rise to around 1.5. They didn't even have the light at the end of the bullpen either. Liam Hendriks started the year on the injured list while he was bravely enduring treatment for cancer, and upon his return in late May, Hendriks could only manage 5 games before getting the news that he'd need Tommy John surgery, abruptly ending his 2023 season and his tenure with the team. Many guys, both effective and ineffective, were out the door by the trade deadline as the White Sox blew up the roster. Lance Lynn, who lost almost all of his value with a terrible first half, was shipped out to the Dodgers. Jake Berger's breakout continued, but the best of it came after he left for Miami. Lucas Giolito and Reynaldo Lopez got sent out in a package to Anaheim and then even ended up pitching for the same team that broke White Sox fans' hearts a year prior. The White Sox were easily one of the biggest disasters in baseball. But in late August, White Sox fans got news of perhaps the only good thing to come out of this nightmare season. season. Longtime assistant general manager and then general manager Rick Hahn, who had been employed with the team since 2002, was fired. The same went for Kenny Williams, who came on first in 2000 and served as GM initially before being promoted to vice president. This duo ran the Southside's franchise for over 2 decades. They also spearheaded some of the most dumbfounded moves in MLB over the past 20 years. The trading of Chris Sale, swapping Fernando Tatis Jr. for James Shields, giving away Marcus Semien and Chris Bassett for Jeff Samardzija, and the list goes on. Though they left the team in complete disarray, White Sox fans can hold some solace in the fact that this duo was finally held accountable and relieved of their duties after years of ineptitude. And that takes us to 2024. It's going to be a long road ahead back to relevance for the White Sox, but at least that journey has officially begun. Even in absolutely disastrous years, teams have emerged from the rubble of losing seasons and breathed life into a new era for their franchises. Maybe the White Sox can be next in line, but there is certainly work to be done, trades to be made, and games to be lost. But that'll do it for this video. If you guys enjoyed it, consider leaving a like on the video and subscribing to the Jolly Olive channel, and I'll see you guys next time.